Kinley, you are a 5 out of 10.
Whoa, I can't even watch that without getting emotional. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I'm dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, we're going to discuss love. And I know that this is going to sound corny, but we're going to discern when is sex actually love? And how can you actually more fully love one another? And this is coming from a priest who is promised to live a chaste and celibate life. So I'm not married. What do I know about relationships? Well, actually, a lot, because the church teaches us the truth about relationships and the truth about love. So before we jump into it, please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. We know a lot of people do watch the shows, but a lot of people don't actually just hit that subscribe button, and you have no idea how much that helps us. And when you leave a comment, it helps us to overcome the suppressions of the algorithm that really want to kind of tamper down or not allow good Catholic content to actually reach the masses. So please make sure you do that. And also, please make sure you consider supporting us on patreon.com/The Father Leo Show, because it does not only support us, but it gives you access to some pretty good content and some special perks. So let's just jump right into it, and let's talk about sex or love, or both. So full disclosure, I'm actually on my retreat, and I wasn't going to do an episode while I'm on my retreat, but I felt convicted to do so. And since my whole retreat is about responding positively to what God is asking me to do, I'm offering this content for you. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to start off with a clip that demonstrates beautiful love. And I know this is going to be interesting because you're thinking, oh, this is going to be romantic. Well, it's not. It's about the purest form of love, which we're going to get to right after you watch this heartwarming video.
Have one perfect match, and the other person is a 5 out of 10. So who wants to be the perfect match? Me?
Kinley, you are a 5 out of 10.
I'm never gonna say this.
That's amazing. I'm not crazy. Yes! Kaden, you are Josie's hero. Kaden, I'm gonna save you. Kaden, please save Josie. I will.
Have one perfect match.
Whoa, I can't even watch that without getting emotional. I'm not sure if you fully understood this, but obviously that little child has leukemia, and this little child has 2 older siblings, an older sister and a big brother. And the parents were wondering who is going to be a donor, I guess, for bone marrow transplant. And both of the siblings wanted to do it. And they were kind of having like this contest as to who's going to save their little sister. And the little boy is a 5 out of a 10 match, which means, I guess, in medical terms, he's a good donor whose marrow or blood transfusion or whatever it is will be effective in saving his little sister. And I don't know if you heard at the very end, the big sister says something to the effect of, "You're going to save our little sister." And he screams out, "I will." And he gives his big sister a hug after he gave his little sister a hug. What does this have to do with love? Well, let's talk about the 4 types of love. This is coming from just the classic C.S. Lewis's 4 Love. I want to refer to them just really briefly because I think this is important. You know, as our world is celebrating St. Valentine's Day on February the 14th, I think we're pretty messed up in our understanding of what love is, because a lot of times people just limit it to eros, which is erotic love. You can even hear the word eros, eroticism. It's just sexual, physical love. And that's not bad, but it's not the only meaning of love. Another type is called storge, which is a type of affection for, say, like pizza. You know, I storge pizza. The other is philia love, and that philia love is kind of like friendship or brotherly love. It's what is named after the city of brotherly love, Philia Delphoi. So brotherly love, because Delphoi means brother. Sadly, what you see in Philadelphia these days is not very brotherly, and it's not very loving. It's very sad, actually. And then the fourth type of love is this kind of self-giving love called agape love. And it's the kind of love represented in that big brother. But here's what's interesting about that video. As cute as it is and as touching as it is, I was more interested in where this kid got his excitement to give of himself for his little sister. A little sister that I'm sure got on his nerves at some point. I'm sure that he was kind of like maybe a bully at some point, because that's just what children do. They sometimes act kind of crazy. I'm sure that all of the siblings probably fought. But where did he get his love to the point where he'd be willing to give himself and, yeah, go through some pain in being a donor of some sort for his little sister? Well, in the background, what you do not see, but you hear, is the mom and dad. And the mom and dad are key to understanding this kind of love, because they've got to learn it from someone. And if it's not coming from mom and dad, I guarantee you there's going to be a trans activist or a gay activist or someone who is just an activist in a non-theological sense going to try to shove a form of this kind of love, just perhaps erotic or even just the storge version of love, down your kids' throats as they're reading a child story. So the mom and dad are the real heroes here. And this is important because maybe that mom and dad had never read anything of the theology of the body. But I can tell you that the Catholic Church knows a lot about love. And St. John Paul II, in his writing, which is now known as the Theology of the Body, but it's basically 129 lectures that he gave during the Wednesday audiences beginning on September 5th, 1979 and ending on November 28th, 1984. He started talking about family love and the love between husband and wife, because that is the beginning of family, and family is the beginning of society. And if society is damaged in terms of its understanding of love, it's only because the family's understanding and de facto mom and dad's understanding of love was messed up. Now, this makes me just reflect because, again, I'm on a retreat and I'm just reflecting on how I'm loving God and how am I loving others according to God's love. And how have I learned about love? Well, I can tell you there's a lot more to it than anything else. And so what I want to do is I want to just summarize just very quickly what this all led to in now what is the encyclical Familiaris Consortio in 1981 by St. John Paul II. And I'm just going to kind of talk about love beautifully sacramentalized in marriage. So true love is always going to lead to something unitive and procreative. Unitive means bringing people together, and procreative means procreation, pro-life. It's not abortive, it is procreative. That means it is open towards life. And guess what? Even as a priest, I technically can have a child, but I choose not to. But I can have spiritual children. And you know, maybe you can leave this in the comments. Sometimes I wonder, am I a good spiritual father? I'm not a parish priest like you would have in a parish, but that's only because I know that the church has got to reach out beyond parish bounds. So in a way, I still have to be procreative. I have to bring life into my ministry. But in Familiaris Consortio from 1981, we can at least summarize a few things about what love should eventually look like. It should look like marriage. And according to St. John Paul II, marriage is prophetic. It is memorialized. It's actuation. It's the sacrament that unites spouses to God, not just spouses to each other, but it unites that spouse to God. It is ordained by God and fulfilled by God, which means God is the one who brought the two of you together, and God is going to be the one who keeps you together. It's a way to fulfill God's plan for humanity. Now that's key, because that just basically means you don't get married for yourself. You're part of a much bigger picture. And I can just simply say that Louis and I think Zélie, I can't remember the name of Saint Therese's mom and dad, but Saint Therese became a saint because she learned it from her own family. And so this idea that you are fulfilling God's plan for humanity, man, love is a big deal, and we need to learn more about it. And there's a few other things in here too, and I'm just going to go through it very quickly, that marriage can actually heal sins and division. It's a way to contribute to renew society in this world. A good marriage can actually heal society. It's a way to show who Christ is as the way, the truth, and the light. Incredible. Incredible. Marriages actually show an image of God's way, truth, and light. And you know, when I take a look at some happy families, Catholic families, I do see a beautiful path. I do see truth. I do see light coming from them. And then also, it's a way in marriage to participate in the priestly office of king, prophet, and priest. Yeah, mom and dad, in a sense, are the priests of their domestic church. So all of this is very powerful stuff. And I just wanted to offer this to you because I think it's good to at least learn something. I think too often in our Catholic faith, and maybe even from some of my listeners in my audience, they just want to feel. That's why, my gosh, some of the responses, especially when people disagree with me, are so passionate, but you can see that they're not actually thinking through what they're saying. They're just emoting. So I wanted to offer this to you simply as a way for you to think, because now I'm going to give you something practical, and this is going to be something particularly for the world to understand. This is something that I think all of culture can learn about when it comes to love. There is no doubt that the culture is pretty messed up when it comes to love. I could play 1,001 videos of just weird people and weird marriage proposals. Honestly, some of it is just so off-putting. To be honest with you, it's disgusting. And again, it's not about the agapic form of love. It's like more just the eros form of love. So here's what I want to do. As a priest, it's my job to take what I think God has given to me and interpret it for you in a way that makes faith more digestible, more practical, more livable. So here are some thoughts. If you want to celebrate love, whether it be on Valentine's Day or your anniversary, I want you to learn LOVE. Very simple. All right. The first L I'd like to just offer is labor in listening. That truly is one of the most difficult things about love. And a lot of times people think that love is just something that's going to come easy, and it's not. It takes a lot of work. In fact, the word work in Greek is liturgos, which is where we get the word liturgy. And that's why it takes a lot of work to love the liturgy. And what's hard about the liturgy is actually listening. Because, you know, I think people aren't listening, so it goes over the head, and they just don't care about Mass. They just don't. But Mass is God's way of uniting himself to his people. That's God fulfilling his covenant with us, his mystical bride, the church. And God labors listening to us in what we call prayer, but it's more commonly known as complaining. So if God is listening to us because God loves us, I think true love requires us to listen to one another. You know, I think about how Jesus sent out his disciples two by two. And he didn't send them out on their own, but two by two. And it kind of fulfills the twofold ministry to love God and to love one another. And so it requires two people, you know, and that's why love just requires us to listen to each other. And it is a labor. I mean, I'm just going to admit it. I don't like listening to people sometimes just complain. You know, there are times in the confessional when I'm listening and I've got to just say, God, help me to love this person as they're just droning on about whatever. And it's usually not about sins. It's usually about them complaining about their spouse's sins or their children's sin or a politician's sin. So it requires us to truly labor to listen. So maybe try that. Instead of giving your spouse or your significant girlfriend or boyfriend or someone you're dating seriously, you know, a gift, maybe give them your ear and actually pay attention to them and listen to them. The O is going to stand for offering ordo amoris. Now, you've heard this term from Vice President J.D. Vance as he kind of shot back at people accusing the administration of being reckless and not really listening to the people or not loving citizens because they're being, in a sense, you know, deported for illegalities. Very interesting, because he kind of gives to them a very Catholic response, is that there is an order to love. There really is. I mean, before you can love a citizen, you got to love God first. And loving God first is key. And then what comes after that is the spouse that you choose. And then your children. And then your children, your family's kind of environment. And then if you are loving properly in that regard, then you can continue to expand your love to, yes, the neighbor who might or might not be a citizen of the United States. But there is an order. And so when people just simply say, you got to love your neighbor, no, the first is actually, you got to love God first. And if you truly love God, there is a justice that is required of loving God. And so when I say offer up ordo amoris, it just basically means make sure that your offering is of self to God and making sure that there's a proper order. Because if your love for your girlfriend or boyfriend or your major crush or even your husband and wife or even your children come before God, then you've got a problem. So maybe what I'm asking you to do is asking everybody watching this, do you actually love God with all your heart, mind, and soul? And then do you love your neighbor as yourself? And Jesus is going to qualify this by saying, do you love them the way he loves them? That he's actually willing to die for them. That's why that kid in the video has offered up ordo amoris. You know, he's not married to anyone, but he's obliged as a big brother to love his little sister. It's so beautiful when you think of it this way. So offer up the proper order of loving. This is where I want you to just hear me out. It's value victory. This is part of love. Value victory. And why? Well, because there are going to be challenges along the way. And there are going to be some fights worth having. And there are going to be some fights that are very worth having, but people don't actually value them. Let me give you an example. Going to church as a couple. Do you value that? Well, that should be the number one priority for you. Do you pray together? That should be the number one priority for you. And if not, then you got to realize that this is a fight that the devil doesn't want you to do. And that's why I want you to value victory. Because if you're weak and you think like, oh my gosh, I can't take my spouse to church because my spouse isn't really religious, I need you to trust that God is going to be victorious. That Jesus has already won that battle for you. Be trusting in the victory, but make sure that the victory is in the proper value. If you think, oh gosh, my most important thing is to raise a lot of money for my family, then your value is in money. And you working hard might bring about victory. But if just providing the goodness for your family, because again, I know a lot of poor families have their values in line and they experience a tremendous amount of challenges. But you know what? They are victorious over the things that matter and their families are staying together. That's valuing the proper victory that Jesus Christ can do for you. And then the final lesson that I'd like to offer is E, enthusiastic engagement. I like the word enthusiastic because it comes from the two words entheos. Greek theos means God. So entheos, godly engagement. Do you remember when you all got engaged, or if you're planning to get engaged, you're probably thinking, how am I going to do this so that the person I'm going to propose to knows that I'm fully invested? Well, that kind of engagement is something that should never end after marriage. In fact, I always tell couples that true fidelity and true experience of marriage begins the day after your wedding day, and the following day, and the following day, and the following day. And it's hard to be engaged. Trust me, as a priest, there are times when I'm more engaged in my priestly ministry than not. And it's too bad for me. And I confess that because I just know that if I'm not fully engaged in my priestly ministry, then I'm not entheos. I'm not enthusiastic. I'm not in God. And so I pray to God every day that I can be entheos, enthusiastic in God in my engagement as a priest. Now, I mentioned to you these 4 loves at the very beginning. And again, I want you to kind of hear what I'm going to just offer to you. That we are all learning how to love. And that's okay if any of the things that I say are challenging. Let me know in the comments below what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, because I think that this requires more than just one episode. I mean, my gosh, it took 129 lectures from a saintly pope to try to explain love to people. I've got 30 minutes, so to speak. But I hope that this kind of engages your thought. But I want to do now is just end with my commentary, because I think that we can learn a lot about love when Jesus asked his disciple, do you love me? Here's my commentary. John, the beloved disciple, is known as the beloved disciple. But that didn't mean that Jesus didn't love the others. It just meant that there was a special affection for John. And it's interesting that of all of the disciples, John was, his martyrdom was attempted twice. One by boiling him alive, and the other is by trying to poison him, and he survived both. And he's the only disciple who died a natural death. The others died by martyrdom. And the first to die was Peter. And Peter, in John's Gospel 21, would ask the question 3 times, do you love me, do you love me, do you love me? And each time, Peter would say, I love you, I love you, I love you. But here's where the Greek language and those 4 loves that I mentioned at the beginning of the show can be helpful. Because Jesus starts off by asking, Peter, do you agape me? Which means, do you love me in a selfless way? The way that that big brother loved his little sister. The way that the mom and dad of that little big brother taught what it means for self-giving love. I'm sure it wasn't easy to raise kids. It's not easy to raise kids. But my gosh, teaching them how to love is the most important lesson you can give to them. But Peter responds by saying, yes, Lord, I phileo you. I love you like a brother. I love you like a good friend. like a best friend. And then Jesus is going to ask one more time, Peter, do you agape me? Do you love me in such a self-giving way, the way I love you? Peter responds by saying, I phileo you. I love you like a brother. Of course I love you like a brother. Now each time Jesus says, then feed my sheep, tend my flock. And then the third time, this is interesting because Jesus says, Peter, do you phileo me? Do you love me like a brother, like a good friend? And Peter will respond, phileo. I love you like that. Now you would think that there might be some sort of wow moment that Peter would get it and say, I agape you. You would think and you would hope. But you know what? The resurrection was still very new to these disciples. They had no clue what they were about to embark on. They were getting a hint of it when they saw what they did to Jesus and killing him in such a merciless way. And they were running scared. But Peter will eventually agape love Jesus when he finally dies on the cross, crucified upside down in what is now known as the major crypt tomb of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, over which a church has been built. It's just striking to me that even the disciple didn't quite get it. But eventually he will. We have got a lot to learn about love. I'm on a retreat for 5 days, mostly silence with the exception of like these videos. It's because I'm trying to listen to God so that I can love God better and also love one another as a priest is supposed to love. And it's not easy. And I have got a lot to learn. But hopefully I learned enough that I can share a little bit with you so that you can have a more blessed day to celebrate your love for each other. So, happy Valentine's Day. Learn a little bit from that saint who was a martyr for the church. And let's pray that we can be just like this little man, his big brother. I kind of want to play this again because it's such a good way to end. And hopefully, when you see this video, take everything that I said and apply it to this video. And not only will it make more sense to you, it'll make you more enthusiastic to try to raise children like that. Children who love one another as brothers and sisters in Christ. Thank you for watching. God bless you. Stay hungry for God. And once again, I'm going to end with this video.
Have one perfect match, and the other person is a 5 out of 10. So who wants to be the perfect match?
Kid Lady, you are a 5 out of 10.
I'm never gonna say
That's amazing! I know crazy stuff! Yes! Kaden, you are Josie's hero! Kaden,